Barry Walsh. Like
It's not mic'd yet.
The mic.
No mic?
Yeah.
Do I need a mic or can you hear me in the back?
I need a mic.
Because I tend to talk loud, because I'm deaf.
Well, can the mic?
You all right?
We're asking for the mic.
You want the mic? All right.
We're all deaf.
Sing us a song.
Do you wanna take that off the same area?
No, I don't want to do a handheld mic. Sorry. We'll work it out. Okay. Helping at all?
Once it's turned on.
That's because it's not turned
Keep it
on.
on.
That was a good test.
How about that?
Yeah.
All right. I want to thank my two collaborators, my wife Valerie Wedge. She formatted this entire PowerPoint. And Anna, as is the case for all of my activities involved in publications, she did the photography. I also want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Kim Martindale for inviting me to do 2 talks at this show. This particular lecture focuses on largely contemporary issues, some historic. And I just want to remind you of how I collect information from Hopi people. I set up interviews. I meet with people face to face, although there was some delay during COVID as I was preparing the second book. And I write down what they say by hand. I think microphones are kind of off-putting. And then I type up when I get back home in Massachusetts. I am Massachusetts' only casino dealer, I assure you. No one else even knows what they are. Anyway, I type it up, then I forward it to the people I've interviewed and telling them that they have full control over the information that's published about them. And they have a right to reject the publication altogether. So the point is to be accurate and respectful. And that's how I proceed in doing material about Hopi Katsina. As I also clarified yesterday, I don't consider myself an expert. Only the Hopi are expert about Hopi Katsina carvings. I do consider myself a specialist because I have focused on Hopi Katsina since the late 80s and have written a lot of articles over the years, and then in the last 5 years published 2 books. The one that came out last year won a first prize in the New Mexico book competition in the art category. And since an art category is usually visual and photographic, my daughter Anna probably deserves a large credit for that particular award. So, a bit about rules of Hopi Katsina. And these are the traditional rules that Hopi individuals have shared with me. Katsinim are supposed to be carved by those who are Hopi. And that means they have a mother who is a Hopi individual. If your father's Hopi, you technically are not Hopi if your mother is not. Katsinim are only supposed to be carved by individuals who have been initiated into the Katsina religion. That usually happens around age 12 or 13. They should only be carved by males. That's been the tradition. For example, women do baskets and pottery, and men were typically said to be the Katsina creators. Now, this talk is about anomalies, so you're going to hear about a lot of exceptions to these rules, all right? Also, there are certain figures that aren't supposed to be carved. They're Hmong or Chief Katsinim, and they're generally frowned on to be reproduced or represented in wood. And Katsinim are supposed to be carved of dry cottonwood root. Why cottonwood root? The explanation is usually that cottonwood root is found next to water, and the Katsina religion is all about obtaining water from these great spirits, from the Katsina spirits, from the heavens to assist with the incredible arid land of Hopi land, which on average is 9 to 12 inches a year. If you've ever seen a Hopi cornfield, it's astonishing. The corn stalks are often individual plants 4 to 5 feet apart. In New England, they're jammed together, everyone. It's a completely different kind of arid agriculture. So those are the rules. And now you're going to hear about anomalies eventually. So this carving here is from the 1880s. It's one of my all-time favorites. And it's a Hisat Katsina. And a Hisat means an ancient one who no longer appears. Because the Katsina religion is a very vibrant religion, and new Katsinim are added to the pantheon, and others fade away. And I showed this to people on Hopi and asked them to identify it, and nobody could identify it as a Katsina that they recognized. And when I bought this, I received, along with it, a letter from Barton Wright, the preeminent Anglo scholar on Hopi matters, who published 13 books on Hopi culture and Katsina carvings and beyond. And the letter said, well, he gives these details here. Well, it's very definitely not a mountain lion because it doesn't have a beard. And it has an animal snout with a beard but no horns. Instead, it has animal ears. And the appearance is mixed. The eyes, ears, snout, and body decoration belong to a bear, but the beard and divided face do not. Therefore, he concludes, if you want a name for your doll, I suggest you call it a Hisat, different spelling than Hisat. The more accepted spelling in the Hopi dictionary these days is Hisat, H-I-S-A-T. So Barton Wright, preeminent scholar, he says it's a Hisat, which is good enough for me. But I did show it to many Hopi individuals, and they couldn't identify. Now, here are a couple other examples of what may well be Hisat Katsina. And no one could identify these either. So what does this suggest? It suggests that some really old examples, such as this, represent individuals that have faded into history and they don't appear anymore, and they're not likely to make a comeback. In a sense that, therefore, they are an anomaly. They're an unusual manifestation of the Hopi Katsina tradition. Here's a couple of other Hisat examples. The first one on the left was published in my 2019 book. It's from the Heard Museum. Nobody knows what it is. And this one comes from the famous 1903 Fuchs volume of Hopi Katsinam, all painted by Hopi individuals. Nobody can figure out what that is. In the book itself, 1903, it's identified as a Masi bowl, but no Hopi recognize this. And is this likely to be something that's forgotten? Look at he's carrying, both of them are carrying dynamic water serpents. That's not going to be forgotten if it's still an active religion, an active figure in the religion. So other Hisat examples. So this debate ended up occurring on Hopi land with friends of mine about, are there Hisat Katsinams or are they made up? And some of the knowledgeable Hopi friends, this was a fun debate. I said, what's to say there weren't other examples of carvers like Tawaquaptua, who I talked about at length yesterday, the famous Hopi chief who deliberately mixed up or made up all his dolls because of his religious role. He felt he shouldn't be selling accurate representations of Katsinas. So my friend said, who says Tawaquaptua was the only one that made them up? Maybe other people did it. And they make a good point. The Anglo customers, be they anthropologists or tourists, they don't tend to know the accurate details on Katsinam, such as specific features on the face, body paint, sashes, kilts. So perhaps the carvers didn't need to be especially accurate. And they make a good point about commercialism. Some carvers have been in a hurry, need some money, and knocked off something for quick sale. And there is a long tradition among Native American art in which certain art forms were modified for saleability. And okay, interesting debate. Did we really solve the debate? We didn't. It's an ongoing conversation. My particular way of determining if something is Hesite or not is look at the details. Does it have an accurate rendition of a sash, a kilt, body paint? If all of that seems to be rendered accurately, then in all likelihood, it's a Hesite Katsina if the figure itself looks to have considerable age, such as from the 19th century. But anyway, what happened with the whole Hesite topic is I started thinking about anomalies, and I thought, what an interesting topic. Variations on the typical Hopi Katsina. So here are the first set of anomalies that myself and those friends I described, we brainstormed. What were some examples of variations, of exceptions? Actually, my friends told me stop using the word anomaly, even though it's in the book cover. They said it's a pretentious Anglo word. Use something more basic. And I stuck with it because I thought it was the most accurate one, but they had a point. But I stuck with anomalies. Could it have been exceptions? I find the word exception kind of bland, boring. So anomalies it is. So here are some examples. Very large examples, very small miniature Katsina. Variations on cradle dolls, which have a very specific rendition expectation, usually. Route 66 dolls, where the hell did they come from? Carvings by women, forbidden. Katsina made of cloth and yarn or unusual wood. I'm going to show examples of that. Katsina made of glass. Wait, it's all supposed to be common. What about Katsina on strings? We don't call them puppets. You know why that is? Because there are secret Hopi ceremonies, which I know nothing about, that do involve entities on strings that can be referred to as puppets. So when I talk about Katsina on strings, there are 3 examples in my booth. I use that term very specifically, not puppet, in order to avoid being offensive. I'm not talking about religiously significant marionettes, okay? I'm talking about jumping jacks or Katsina on strings. What about another exception are Katsina made of tufa carved sterling. And do any of you know of Gerald Kotskiva's gnarly root? He's been working on it for 20 years. It's a piece of root from the floor to here, this big. He's carving it 3-dimensionally. There are pictures of it in my book. Great time collaborating with Gerald on that. It's not finished, but it sure is an anomaly, I'll tell you that. And I'll mention a few other individual anomalies as we continue. So I showed you this slide yesterday. This is the earliest depiction of Hopi cradle dolls that I've ever seen, from the 1890s. Well, there are a couple in museums that appear to be even earlier, but interesting collection. Largely Hahaiwuti with the arrows, that's the grandmother Katsina, said to represent the ideal characteristics of all women. So, what do you notice about these dolls? Even though they're very old, they all have essentially 3 vertical red stripes. And I described yesterday what those 3 stripes may mean. I won't repeat that today. Well, here's an anomaly. These anomalies came from 1887. And they're just beautiful. That's a konina on the left, a havasupai, and on the right is a polygamana. But they're rendered in pottery form. Just a fascinating alternative to cottonwood root. And notice how they have not been standardized yet. Both of them have 5 or 6 stripes, not 3. So those are anomalies that predate other modifications. This is what standardization came to be. A Hahaiwuti, 3 stripes, hands in the bellyache position, and some creative person got 5 Putzkatuhu cradle katsinum and put them all on one base. And I owned that for quite a while. Now this is one that was in my booth yesterday, It's a giant anomaly. This thing is 17 inches tall from Filbert Hanani. That is a major variation on the cradle doll that's usually about this big. Here's one I've never seen anywhere else from the Cameron Trading Post. It's cradle dolls depicted on a coiled vessel. What a great vessel. And that just is not a common rendering. And here, my friend Derek Makwesa Shamerika, he's a very traditional carver in many ways, but on one occasion, a couple occasions I guess, he made alternatives on cradle catsina to the traditional 3 stripes. So the fire guard on the far left, instead of 3 stripes, he gave us a fire. And on the right, he gave us a cloud katsina with clouds on the base. So what's the point? Some artists, some creative individuals start modifying and making changes to standard Hopi art forms. And as you're about to see, some of them are a lot more adventurous than this. Hey, here's a creative guy named Quincy Taylor. It's still got Hahai Wuti on it, but he's got another figure holding Hahai Wuti. So both of them are double cradle katsinas. Creativity. You know, when I said I was doing, I posted on Facebook and Instagram, I'm doing a respectful book on Hopi anomalies. If you have anything to suggest, let me know. Quincy Taylor was in touch. Said, what about these? I said, oh yeah, let's do business. So anyway, another example. And this is the largest one I've ever seen from my friend and esteemed artist, Manuel Donette Chavarria. He did the painting on this hat,
Nice.
which I'm grateful. And what is that? These are Polilocongs, these are water serpents. So I'm protected by water serpents, which is not a bad thing. So that's it for cradle katsina anomalies. These are Route 66 dolls. You'll see them in various booths at this show. Here are a few right here. I have 10 or 11 in my booth. I brought up 5. This one is just raw wood, hasn't been painted yet. These days, they're generally made not of cottonwood root, but of pine. And the person who started the whole thing was Emil Pooley. And I met with his daughter and his wife. And the Route 66 story is quite interesting. There's Emil Pooley, a guy who thought it all up and started making them, and they survived to today. And he started doing it in the 1930s. Why did he do it? Well, he was supposed to have a major ceremonial role in the village of Hope Villa, one of the more conservative religious villages on Hope. But he was one of those guys that got essentially arrested by the United States government and moved to a school that was designed to take the Indian out of the Indian, such as their language, their clothing, their hairstyle, etc. So he was sent to boarding school in Albuquerque, and he never returned to Hopi land. Instead, he married a Navajo woman, had 7 children, and converted to Mormonism. So as I wrote here, this is not a typical Hopi trajectory. He took a job at the Santa Fe Railroad to support his family, and was doing quite well until he had an accident and he lost 2 of his fingers. And they laid him off, or they discharged him. He no longer could work there. He had no way to support his family. But an odd thing happened. He went to the World's Fair in Chicago in 1933, and he was sent there to perform as a native dancer, among others. And he noticed all this interest in Native American culture, baskets, katsina carvings, weavings, dances, etc. And he thought, geez, there seems to be money to be made in this native stuff. What could I possibly do to make some money to support my wife and my children? Well, he remembered dolls from the 1920s that looked like simple clothespins almost. And by the 30s, they were starting to have extended arms and detailed details of their accoutrements, their clothing, their sashes, and so on. And so he wanted to go back to something simple like this because he thought his hands could carve something that simple. So that's not a Route 66 doll, that's a real 1920s Hopi Talave or Morning Katsina. So he started making these dolls, and he ground them on a disc or a lathe. Nobody was making Katsina with a disc or a lathe on Hopi land. He started painting them with acrylic paints, which was not what were being used. And he used chicken feathers from his own flock. And eventually his wife started doing them with him, not a typical Hopi arrangement. And he used his own chicken feathers, which I find kind of charming. And he discovered these simple little carvings. They sold quite well. And the Fred Harvey Trading Post, Rainbow Man carries them to this day. A place called Jack Rabbit in Winslow, Hubble's. And eventually he opened his own trading post in Joseph City, which is a Mormon community. And to his credit, he didn't call them Katsina dolls. He called them souvenir dolls. So he knew he wasn't making real Katsina carvings. He was making an alternative to support his family. This is, I had such a wonderful time interviewing these two children of Emil Pulley, Grace and Leroy. Unfortunately, not long after I interviewed Leroy at his home in Phoenix, he died of COVID. And notice that they kept the tradition of the Pulley family making Route 66 dolls. They've been making them ever since. And there's another family member named George who also made them, and these happen to be made by George, and they're all signed by G. Pulley, who is George Pulley. So it became a family affair. Now, this is my friend, Lowell Wagner. He kind of likes them.
Yeah.
He has 2,000 in his home in New Mexico. And I started buying them at, garage sales. And then I'd come through and I'd buy a couple from Newberry, or they'd find them in antique malls. Anyway, the guy has 2,066 dolls, and he has them in very varied types. For example, the one on the left is about 5 feet tall, and this one here, these two here are made with railroad tie wood.
Wow.
He's into it. In fact, he's into it more than anyone else. And when the book came out and I sent him his copy with the chapter section on him and his collection, his daughter contacted me and requested 5 more copies for all of the family relatives, because they're so pleased to see that he's getting some attention for. He really is the man with the Route 66 doll museum, but he doesn't have a sign out and he never welcomes strangers that I'm aware of. So that's what I have to say about Route 66 dolls. And so they're a derivative of Hopi Katsina, but they're not really Hopi Katsina, but they're an anomaly, and very interesting. Created as an anomaly in 1930s, now it is 90 years later, and they're still very popular and found in many galleries, trading posts, gas stations. All right. So these are just a few examples of George's work, and they're colorful and pleasant and fun, and they refer to the Hopi Katsina spirits, but they don't fully represent it, let's face it. Now I'm going to talk about women carvers. And it's controversial to this day for women to carve Katsina. Some of the men are extremely resentful of any women who carve. And women carvers that I interviewed for the chapter on women carvers, they described to me having been treated very coldly, even by relatives, and openly criticized at museum shows. And the consensus is the first person to ever start carving Katsinum who was a woman was Ottilie Jackson. And how did she become a Katsina carver? Well, her husband was a Kiva chief. Had an important religious role. He went blind as a young man and he couldn't tend his fields. So she began to carve Katsinum in order to support the family, which had a number of children. You'll see some of them. So this is a carving from her from 1988. And she started carving in the 30s, so this was quite a lot of time later. It's rather simple carving, but it worked for her. Now, Ottilie taught all 8 of her children, regardless of gender, to make Katsinum. And asked about negative feedback towards women carvers, Edna, her daughter, who I interviewed with 2 granddaughters, she said, a lot of males take money from their carvings and use it on themselves. They don't spend it on their families, and they may spend it on things they shouldn't. What's she referring to there? Alcohol, substances. She's not saying all Katsina carvers are abusing alcohol and substances, but she has a point to some extent. Women carvers take money from their craft, they spend it on their children to support their families. We call ourselves self-employed. This is an assertive woman. There are a lot of women carvers out there. Women rule. That's how she ended our interview. Edna, do something else.
Yeah.
Now, how successful has the prohibition against women carvers been? Not very. This is a list of women carvers that was published by the Native American Art Museum in DC. And I went through Greg Schaff's 2008 book on Katsina carvers, and I identified 89 carvers by name. So that prohibition has not helped, has it? Now, I'm going to say something about notable women carvers. This is Deloria Adams. Anna took this wonderful portrait of her a couple of years ago in Hopi Land at her home. And at the time, I ordered a couple of Katsinum. This is a star and a bumblebee, Nangasobu and Momo. And she sent them to me. She said, I'll have these ready for you in 2 weeks. They arrived in 2 weeks, let me tell you. It was dependable. And just a wonderful woman. I said, and now her husband carved too. And in a book by Branson, towards the end of that book, there were 60 Katsinum by both of them. And they carved together. I said, how do you describe your carving vis-a-vis your husband's Elmer? She said, oh, his are better. And I said, are you just being modest? She said, maybe. So that's Deloria. Now, this is in a whole different realm. Ultra-realistic carvings from the 80s, 90s, etc. These came from Muriel Navazi Kalmintoa. She was a major force in the shift in Hopi Katsinum to ultra-realism. And she often did them in miniature. And she's often credited with moving her husband, Cecil Kalmintoa, perhaps the most famous ultra-realistic carver ever. She's often credited with being the one who, because of her work in miniatures, greatly helped him enhance the meticulousness of his ultra-realistic carving. Unfortunately, you see, she died at a very young age of pneumonia, but it may have been a local virus on the reservation, the hantavirus. Another notable women contributor. Sandra Suhu is a friend of mine. She's a real character. This is what she looks like. And she's unusual in that she carves both in the traditional style and the ultra realistic. And in multiple interviews with her, she's told me about the negative feedback that she's received from Hopi individuals, including even close relatives. She started carving similar to other female carvers because of absent or damaged males. And she said her twins' father was not there for them, so she started carving to survive. And she is one tough cookie, let me tell you. And a great model for women on Hopi land. This is a traditional style Crow mother. And so other comments from her. There are a lot of female carvers, but not many of them are as crazy as me to go to shows and sell in a booth right next to a bunch of males. She said when she's done shows at the herd, some relatives would not even talk to her. And she said a neighbor from Hauteville, who happened to have a booth right next to hers, would criticize her work as the customers were coming into her booth, damaging her business. So I said to her, did that discourage you? Did you think you maybe should quit carving? No way. If people put me down, I just decide to make a doll that's bigger and better. It hurts to have relatives and people I'm close to criticizing me, but when they pay my bills, I'll stop carving. Message received. Now, I should comment, I don't take a stance on any of these issues. That's for the Hopis to negotiate and manage amongst themselves. I report the differences, but as an outsider, it's none of my damn business as to what artists choose to do. On the other hand, these are interesting human experiences that I encounter, and it's fascinating to learn about them. Those are two in the traditional style by Sandra, and one thing I pointed out to her as I started to understand, appreciate, and acquire her work is she often shades her figures differently than male carvers. And she said, you know, others have said that about my carvings, that they have a certain female aesthetic. And here's an ultra-realistic example of a polygmena who is grinding corn. And why do I call it ultra-realistic? It has a fully beaded necklace with real beads. There's clothing around her body. The matate, that's not the Hopi word, but the corn grinding tool is very accurately rendered, as are the dimensions of the tabletta. And quite a talented artist. She made this bolo tie, and I saw she posted it on Facebook and said, I want some of those. I thought, if you look at it, it looks like a cutout wicker plaque, right? But it isn't. It's made of cottonwood root. She's carved it so precisely, it looks exactly like wicker. But anyway, she's innovative. Okay, now I'm going to talk about Katsina made of unusual materials. Another type of anomalies. I better speed this up. These folks, I met with this married couple, Derek Q and Lou Dean Silas, and they make dolls out of cloth. And notice on the left are the different components in different stages. And a Caesar's pizza box is serving as the foundation for this particular Katsina. That is not a typically Hopi material. Little Caesar pizza. And you can see the different forms. And here are two finished Katsina, Katsina made of cloth. And they said something very interesting to me when I interviewed them at their home. They said, well, at times, at ceremonies, real Katsina give these out as presents to children. To which I said, well, that's a pretty significant form of acceptance, isn't it, that they're giving out the cloth dolls. So, there's one example. This is someone whom I'm extremely fond of. Her name is Alicia Milligan. If you know Te Poliquaptua, a very well-established Hopi carver, Te is her grandfather, and she lives with him. So here's an example. She only makes manas. She said, I don't think, as an uninitiated female, I should make katsina. And anyway, they're adorable, and you'll see them at Indian Market. If you go to Te Poliquaptua's booth, they'll have his magnificently carved, award-winning carvers there, but Alicia will also be there selling these. And when Anna and I went to see her and her grandfather to give them copies of the book when it came out last fall, she took it in her hands. I showed her the page with her picture. She said, Barry, I can't believe I'm in a book. It was so sweet. I mean, it made the whole thing worthwhile. I'm so glad I made you feel good. She's 18 now, but when we started meeting with her, she was like 15. And just a sweet, wonderful human being, and she and Anna connected very well. And by the way, when I interviewed a 15-year-old, I did that with Grandpa present. I'm not freelancing with a 15-year-old. I want her to feel safe and people feeling like this was supervised interaction. This is a good friend of mine, Cimarron Grover, and he lives near Hook Villa. And do those Katsinim look very typical? Well, here's the story with those. He told me that this is a guy that doesn't have much money. And he told me he ran out of cottonwood root once and didn't have enough money to buy new root. And root is a prized commodity on the Hopi reservation. Anyway, he said he located a Navajo sheep herder who had retired and asked him if he could have some of his corral wood. And he took a bunch of slats of corral wood and came home and made katsina out of them. Now, some of the Hopi elders said, it's supposed to be cottonwood root. What is this crap? And Cimarron's good at ignoring things. He ignored that. So here we have a pakwa, or a frog katsina, with extremely aged wood, and the eyes are aged corn cobs, which he's painted the ends of black to represent eyeballs. I have two of those here. This is a koyali or kashari in corral wood, and this is a kokopelli, which has a corn cob nose. And anyway, it is an unusual form. And here is a mana. Look at the amount of wear on the back of this mana. And she too has corn cob hair whorls. This is my friend Ramson. I don't say his last name because he always makes fun of my mispronunciation. But it's something like Lamato Lama. But if the way I just said that, he would laugh and chuckle. And say, no, Barry, it's okay, I'll try. This guy began as an artist making very antique-looking traditional style katsina. Then he started doing stained glass. Then he went to the Corning Art Museum of Glass in Corning, New York, and was blown away by glass blowing. And he decided he was going to bring glass blowing back to Hopi and start blowing figures within the Hopi tradition. And he did several extensive internships at glass blowing academies. And here's his interpretation of the Horseshoe Canyon pictographs. You see that? That's the same figure right there. And good shot of Ramson. And here are Huyemsis, which happen to be right there. He sent them to me as a special order. And this is a mana with butterfly whorl hairdo. And he's now trained a number of Hopi in glass blowing. He has a very elaborate glass blowing studio with all kinds of furnaces that are terrifying. When I posted on Facebook a book on anomalies, Gerald contacted me and said, "What about Katsinum in silver?" I said, "Hey, why not?" So he provided some of these photos for me, Eagle Katsina, and he took us into his studio, and I took a lot of photographs of his work. Tufa casting is a very elaborate, complex process involving significant engineering. Here's a bracelet by Gerald depicting a broad face Katsina. And this is an elaborate bolo tie. When the eagles finally leave a ceremony, the Koyemsi try to prevent them from going away because they love them so much. That's what this depicts. Oh yeah. This is my Masao Katsina bolo tie, made by Gerald at my request, because I have a profound interest in Masao Katsina, which I talked about yesterday, but I won't reiterate today. Here's a real unusual anomaly. It's a Hopi mudhead carving with a magnet in the bottom. What is this about? Well, Ray Trotter, old trader up in Taos, who's been around for years, he sold it to me. He said, well, here's why the mudhead has a magnet in it. And as you can see here, he and his friend would go to the reservation, drive through the villages, and they put that Katsina on the hood of the car, on the front hood, not the dashboard, on the front hood, and they drive through the village very slowly. And he said, they all knew that meant, we're buying, come on out. So I said, did you get in trouble for putting a magnet into a Katsina? He said, no, I'm grateful for the business. So that's the story on that. The last anomaly I'm going to talk about is this beloved figure right here. And it's from 1890 or so. It is a Hopi Salako Katsina. What's puzzling about it? It has no feet. And it never had any feet. Why is that? Well, it took some studying, but the Salako figures, when they appear ceremonially, are 12 to 14 feet tall. And as they move through the procession, they have to rest. And when they rest, they go down on their haunches, and you can no longer see their feet. And this particular photograph from 1897, the one with the arrow, that one's resting. It's not that he's shorter than all the others, it's that he's resting. And is that the only example? No. Well, there's only 3 examples that I'm aware of, but another one is this, a resting Salako in a Zuni home altar, relatively recent, probably the 50s or 60s. And this one is resting too, no feet. So that's a anomaly which was a puzzle to understand and to decipher. And there she is, with the explanation I just gave. So in a sense, we're all anomalies, and that's what I have to say today. And thank you for listening. I'm happy to take any questions. So it made sense to move from a history of Katsina carving to anomalies as the second book. And one emerged from the other. And what an interesting project it was.
The clay Kachin were, what, 1890s or so, and probably made by females. The pottery would have been painted by females.
Right.
Do you think maybe those were painted by males?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I am a one-trick pony. I do Hopi Katsina. And Mark there and others in this room know a lot about pottery and other subjects, but I don't know the answer to the question, I have no idea, but I don't do pottery, the reason is I live in Massachusetts. Can you imagine shipping pottery from Massachusetts? Day after day, it'd be a terrifying prospect, so I stick with wood carving, yes.
Oh, did the carver, that you called Cinnamon, I've forgotten his last name, does he sell anywhere?
Cimarron?
There's Cimarron, sorry.
Yes, he sells to local galleries. Now, he does regular katsinas too. He doesn't just do Corralwood. He used to sell a lot to Joseph Day at Kirshby on Second Mesa, but they've retired. So he sells when he does sell at the other galleries on Hopi, or he might go to Winter Sun in Flagstaff. But he is not a high productive artist. He sort of works occasionally in spurts. Anybody else?
I had a question about, you ever seen Hopi chess sets, the origin of what that is? They're so cool.
I have seen Hopi chess sets. I don't know anything about them. As you can see, I've already told you everything I know. And the additional questions are mostly, I have no idea. Interesting one, they're cool, but I've never actually talked to a maker of one. They're pretty rare things, but it's cool to see all the chessmen in Hopi Katsina forms instead of king, bishop, queen, all that stuff. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed your talk yesterday, but could you give a short tradition? How is the Katsina doll used in the ceremony, to your understanding?
In the ceremonies themselves?
Yeah, what do they do? How do they use them?
Well, the Katsinam at certain ceremonies, the ceremonial figures, the actual Katsinam, the spirit beings, a certain of those folks bring Katsinam to give to children. Girls receive the Katsinam generally. Boys only get one Katsina after birth, a cradle Katsina, and thereafter boys get arrows and rattles and things like that. So they are a gift to the girls, and the gifts are said to represent health, good health, and long life. So they're spirit gifts from spirit beings to foster healthy spirit. And however, Hopi have made them for sale, at least since the 1920s, and perhaps you can talk about certain other a guy named Walsh, a German trader, ordered several hundred Katsinam that he sold to the Fred Harvey Company. So they've been merchandise for a long time. That doesn't mean they don't still have a very serious role in Hopi spirituality as internal objects of respect. But they're not worship items. They're not like crucifixes or Buddhas. And don't forget, there are some 400 or more Hopi Katsina figures, so it's a very large, complex religion with all kinds of subgroups.
But they don't represent deities as such.
Well, some of them do represent deities. Remember how I said some of the Hmong Katsinam are not supposed to be carved? There are some, that's not a word they use, deity. They have their own word for it, Hmong. But there are certain figures who are said to be sponsors and supervisors and overseers over all the others. That's the best I can say.